are right at this moment waiting for the president to exit. He had breakfast this morning, and now he's going to be heading out on Marine One. I would like to say it's a 3-iron over to San Diego, but my 3-iron isn't that long. But we are seeing the city past the Coronado Islands earlier, and then we're making these turns. We're very close. The president he really was scheduled to leave about 4 minutes ago, and we may actually accelerate the departure. And I'll tell you what, it can't be soon enough for those lucky enough to get off in San Diego. Some of them, though, with an air wing, though, that has to fly all the way to Virginia. So their journey not over by any stretch of the imagination. Anticipating, and you may be seeing them now because I'm kind of blind up here in the media center. They'll be manning the rails. It's always a spectacular sight. And once again, it's a beautiful San Diego morning. Lighting by Central Casting. And I'm seeing Marine One right there. It's fired up. Looks like they're picking up a little bit of speed. And as soon as the president walks out, of course, I hope you have the feed that I have. I don't know if you can take that one. But Marine One is up on the flight deck right now, and we're going to stay live right now. Chris, what are you looking at there in the studio?
Yeah, what we're seeing is indeed Marine One, and let's just tell people what the president is planning to do. We said that he was going to California. This is going to be the shift, and you're going to see it. We had all those pictures of the president, both at the podium and in full military gear yesterday, at least in the flight suit. There was talk about him piloting that plane for a while, but he is going to be shifting his focus from war to the economy, and we are really seeing the start of campaign 2004. He's going to be touring United Defense Industries in Santa Clara, California, making remarks to workers and family there. But there's a lot of relief being expressed in response to President Bush's declaration last night that the major combat in Iraq is over. Now, what you see on the right are the people at the dock. And they are some people anxiously awaiting the arrival of their loved ones. But remember, as John was just saying, the Lincoln had a crew of over 5,000 when it was deployed almost 10 months ago. Yesterday, the air wing departed the USS Lincoln while off the coast of San Diego. The rest of the air wing will be offloaded at the Naval Air Station North Island in San Diego. That's where you see the people waiting there. And then the USS Lincoln will be 2,200 people lighter. But that means about another 3,000 to go. It's going to be another 4 days to home port from now until May 6th. That's in Everett, Washington. And then some of the air wing goes all the way to Virginia. So this isn't necessarily homecoming day for everybody, but for the folks on the right, long-awaited day, and they are going to be welcoming their loved ones. John Elliott, back on the USS Abraham Lincoln. The president has taken flight, and I guess there probably were some mixed emotions. What a thrill for those folks who got to sit out on the deck and watch the president up close and personal, or have breakfast with him this morning. But boy, they just want to get home, don't they?
I'll tell you, it was interesting, Chris. I did a whole bunch of informal polling. That's about all you can do on board an aircraft carrier. Who are you more excited about seeing, the president or your family? Takes about a millisecond to say, oh, my family. Great to be making history with the president and all the firsts that happened yesterday and last night as the president addressed the nation from an aircraft carrier. They just want to see their families. Now, you meet moms that have missed 1-year birthdays for their little babies that they had to leave as infants. You see dads that have never seen kids. You see older folks that have missed softball games, baseball games. And there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of anxiety, but overall, people are
munitions and drop bombs if they wanted to. The president came in, hit what's called the 4th cable, but that's the first in the series of 4 cables that are strung a couple of inches off the deck. His tail hook caught that cable, decelerated the plane from 150 miles an hour to 0 in about, I guess it takes about 2.5 seconds. So it's quite a rush, but it's not completely foreign to the president. He flew apparently F-104s back in his days in the Air Naval Reserve, or perhaps it was Coast Guard Reserve. Anyway, he flew. All right, you just hear the cheer going up. You just hear the cheer going up down here in the hangar deck from the sailors who've just been told that the president is departing the ship. Anyway, the president actually took the stick during some of that flight. He actually got to fly the plane, but the landing, that's something you leave up to a naval aviator. and Commander John Lucier apparently did a spot-on job of getting the president on board.
Yeah, he said, he's quoted here, the pressure was ratcheted up just a little bit, but I tried not to think about it. And I'm glad you set the record straight. The fourth cable is actually the first one, so it was a picture-perfect landing, and everybody should know that.
And John, I don't know if you've heard this, but this morning the commander was on television saying he did make sure that the president's safety harness was locked pretty tightly, because if his head bumped anything in that plane, it wouldn't have looked so good for his speech. He didn't want a big knot on his forehead.
That's for sure. The G-forces are tremendous. Imagine it's not quite like hitting a brick wall in your car, but it's pretty close. You're doing 150 miles an hour, going from that to a dead stop in less than 3 seconds. That's a pretty abrupt stop.
John, this is a president who enjoys campaigning. He loves to press the flesh. I'm not calling this a campaign, but just generally, he loves to meet the people. And I would imagine that he was shaking a lot of hands on board the USS Abraham Lincoln, wasn't he?
By my count, he shook hands with about half the ship. No, he got everybody. There were about 200 people on the flight deck during flight operations, and I'm pretty sure he got a handshake or a photo with just about all of those 200. Then there was another handshaking session that the entire nation witnessed after his speech, a handshaking session that went on for a long time. And it's really amazing. I've talked to a number of the sailors who either got to shake hands with the president or tried to, and for them, it's the moment of a lifetime. Some of them have pictures. We talked to a couple of cooks came up to our camera position last night as the president was having his dinner downstairs in the cruise mess. Their eyes were as wide as saucers, and one of them says, "I got to serve the president his steak." And they were so excited. They were absolutely beaming, and it's really been, I think, a morale booster for a ship that's been hard at work fighting the war on Iraq and the war on terror for a long time.
John, I know you had said that the film was all sold out at the store there on board. John Scott on board the USS Abraham Lincoln. Once again, President Bush departing the Abraham Lincoln on Marine One. He is headed to the Naval Air Station at San Diego. We want to remind you also that he is headed off from there to Air Force One. He'll be landing in Mountain View, California, in Silicon Valley. He's going to be giving a speech a little bit later this afternoon. It is set to begin at 12:50 Eastern at United Defense Industries. That's a defense contractor known for making the Bradley fighting vehicles. He'll be speaking there on our national defense, also on the economy today, again set for 12:50 Eastern. And you know where you can find that one live? Right here on Fox
News Channel. That's right. And there is Air Force One and Marine One touching down nearby. A little deceptive. Looks like it's landing on top of Air Force One. It's not, obviously, but landing out there near on the tarmac. And, as John Scott was pointing out, Jane, it's got to be a big sigh of relief of the Secret Service to get the president off the USS Abraham Lincoln safely and back toward where they can control him a little bit more. My goodness, that landing on board the aircraft yesterday must have had a lot of stomachs turning about.
Well, you did notice last night, too, that he kept shaking hands and just kept shaking hands and going on and on and on. And he did have his traditional Secret Service around him on board that ship last night. You noticed that they do not leave, even though they were in a secure site, obviously, in the middle of the ocean with guys, men and women, they're very familiar with in the armed services, but they are there.
And I stand corrected. That was not Marine One that just landed a second ago. Don't know. Maybe it was the advanced helicopter. It's a little bit unclear to us. But we continue to wait as we watch Air Force One and everybody waiting for the president. There we go.
Here we go. After this speech he's going to be giving in Silicon Valley, which is interesting, this speech, it's on the border of San Francisco, which is a place that had some pretty significant anti-war demonstrations, not necessarily Bush country as we know it, but he's going to be giving it right in Silicon Valley there. And then he is going to be moving on to meet up with the Australian Prime Minister John Howard and his wife. They will be guests of the president this weekend at their ranch in Crawford, Texas. So he will head back and meet up with the Prime Minister and his wife and Mrs. Bush. They will all head out to Crawford for the weekend. And Australia, as we know by now, is part of this coalition of the willing in the fight in Iraq and did contribute some troops to that effort as well.
We were talking a moment ago about the landing of the president on board the USS Abraham Lincoln, and Navy pilot John Skip Lussier made the landing himself, though the president did take control of the plane for a while in the air. And here is the comment from Skip Lussier. He said of the president, he was great. Once he got into the brief, he just started remembering it. It was a bonding of aviators. When he got into the plane, I gave him the stick, and it was like he hadn't left the cockpit. And Skip Lussier saying the tailhook landing was an historic first that put naval aviation in the national spotlight. On the landing, the tailhook on the back of the plane catches the last of the 4 steel arresting cables. In this particular case, he caught the first one stretching across the moving carrier, and then that, of course, stops the aircraft about 350 feet. And as John Scott was pointing out, that really subjects the president to twice the force of gravity, or 2 Gs. Ideally, planes are caught by the second cable, but aircrafts always come in at full power, and there are 4 cables there to make sure that they get caught.
And you know, that pilot, their commander, was getting a hard time, I guess, yesterday and this morning. They were teasing him, saying that he took the 4th cable, which we assumed would have been the last one, meaning if he didn't hit that one, if he didn't grab that one, it would have been into the water.
Well, several publications said it was the last cable,
right.
But it's not.
And John corrected us and said, indeed, it actually was the first one, because he spoke to the cable handler who said, the president caught my cable, which, as you can imagine, is probably a pretty big honor, a pretty neat thing. As we see him getting off of Marine One, the president's helicopter there. He has landed at the Naval Air Station in San Diego, about to board Air Force One there. He is on his way to Mountain View, California, to the Silicon Valley. He is set to arrive at United Defense Industries in about 35 minutes from now or so. He's going to tour that area. He is also going to make some remarks there. We're going to be carrying them for you live. He's going to have a speech concerning our defense policy, also talking about the economy. United Defense Industries is the organization he's going to be speaking to. That is a defense contractor, and they are best known, as we said, for making Bradley fighting vehicles, a very successful piece of equipment used in the war in Iraq, among other conflicts. Let's
turn to Trace Gallagher, who is standing by in San Diego, where the president has arrived on board Marine One from the USS Abraham Lincoln. Trace, what can you tell us about the crowds that may be there?
Well, I can tell you, Greg, you see from the president landing on Marine One that he's not very far from the boat. The flight was only about 4 or 5, maybe 6 minutes, which tells us the Abraham Lincoln is not very far off the coast of San Diego. You can see the people around me here. If you can see the people around me here, we're looking at a bird's eye view. This crowd started gathering when we got here this morning around 4:30. The boat still, or the ship rather, not scheduled to come in here until I think about 9 o'clock or 9:30 local time, about an hour and 20 minutes from now. It will make its way through the San Diego Harbor, down across the San Diego skyline, under the Coronado Bridge, and then dock here on North Island. There are thousands of family members scheduled to be here because when the USS Abraham Lincoln finally gets in, it will drop off some 2,300 sailors, their families all here. Of course, 3,000 will remain on board to make their way up to Everett, Washington. But the families gathering here are absolutely thrilled, as you can imagine. John Scott talking earlier, this ship has been at sea now for the better part of 10 months. That is, by the way, the longest that any nuclear powered aircraft carrier has ever been deployed. That is a record. So this is also a historic homecoming for that reason, notwithstanding the fact the president also spoke from the deck of that aircraft carrier last night.
And
let's
Trace,
bring in, if we can,
Trace, we're just going to stop you for one second there. Hold on. We just want to let our viewers know that the president has just gotten off of Marine One. He is just heading on. He's getting out of our shot there. There he is, greeting more, shaking more hands. How many hands do you think he has shaken in the last 24 hours?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Trace, we're going to get back to you in just a second as we continue to watch President Bush pressing the flesh and chatting with people and shaking hands. John Scott's on board the USS Abraham Lincoln. The president just left it a short time ago, and he has a guest with him. John?
Well, yeah, Greg, I'm sure everybody's wondering how the president spent his morning, and I can't tell you. So let's ask the guy who does know. Ron Horton is the ship's executive officer. He's sort of in charge of the day-to-day operation. He'll be the first guy off the ship when it docks in a little bit. You spent some quality time with the President of the United States this morning.
Yes, sir, I did. About 5:45 this morning. The president came out and said, I'd like to go up and get some fresh air. So I took him out on the flight deck. He greeted some troops, and then he and I went to the starboard side of the ship behind the island. It was just he and I, and standing there talking about the ship moving and how fast it goes and how we refuel and a whole lot of different things. It was a pretty wonderful experience to just have me standing there with the President of the United States discussing things.
I guess as Commander-in-Chief, it's really sort of his aircraft carrier, but you get to run it.
Yes, sir. Well, the captain and I get to run it. The captain actually runs it, but being the Commander-in-Chief, he owns it. He owns it all, and actually, it's the American people that own it. He had a few questions about it, but it was exciting.
All right. So when years down the road, your kids and everybody asks you what the President of the United States is like, how do you describe him?
I would describe him as a humble man, a down-to-earth man, and I would describe him as a truly great American. And we love our Commander-in-Chief. I think we saw that yesterday during the speech, during all the applause. He's a great man.
You must have talked about the deployment, about the war in Iraq a little bit. Any particular parts of that conversation come to mind?
We did discuss it, the operations. He was interested to know how long we had operated for and the hours of the day that we operated. And we also talked about the berthing and where people are living with all the noise going on over top with the catapults firing and people landing on top of the sailors' heads. It was interesting to him that we had a 200-man berthing, that we had a lot of females all lived in that 200 females in one berthing. He found that very interesting and unique. And I said, yeah, I described the berthing to him that just like you're staying in, stacked 3 high, 6 to a cubicle, and spread throughout the ship.
That brings up a question. I've been asked a lot of times where the president was sleeping. Now, he was in something called the captain's cabin last night. Is that right? And describe that for us.
The captain has 2 cabins. He has an at-sea cabin, which when we're underway, he sleeps up. It's right up by the navigation bridge, where he is within about 2 seconds in case he needs to go to the bridge. He also has an import cabin, which is a little nicer. That's where we have receptions. Nice big dining room table in there, and the president slept in the import cabin. It's got a bigger size bed in there, dining room table, a living area. It's a little more comfortable. The president did ask me how the captain liked it, and I said, well, sir, he's never slept in it. And he was kind of surprised to hear that, because he spends all his time up on the bridge and driving the ship.
Now, Greg and Jane, I want to share sort of a private conversation that I had with the XO the other night. We were sitting in his office along with another officer, one of the officers in charge of maintenance, talking about all of the hordes of media who've descended on this ship, and these officers have been very gracious in helping us out when we need cables, when we need microphones repaired, that sort of thing. And this maintenance officer said, this is really more difficult than fighting the war, which you agreed with.
Yes, sir, I would. It was, it seemed like I'm in the shipyard a little bit with all the cables and wires running around and going and looking and splicing things and finding TVs and microphones. And you can see the hangar bay is just full with media equipment right now. And just the logistics of getting him assigned to a berthing place, getting him food, getting him escorts to take him around the ship. The planning, we had such a short time to do it, and it was probably a little more difficult than fighting the war.
Plus, when you give us orders, we don't respond very well. Anyway,
that's true.
Executive Officer Ron Horton, you've been very good to have us on board.
Sir, it's been good to have you. And
been good to be on your ship. Thanks very much. I'll toss it back to you in New York.
Okay, John, thanks very much. And again, we are taking a look at a live picture of the president in San Diego, still shaking hands.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable.
I think he's the kind of guy who's going to, he'll do it all day long if he can. He really enjoys meeting the people, and it's about the only thing that will ever delay his very hyper punctual schedule. He is always on time.
And one of the sailors on board had a great quote. He said, it's like when you thought everybody forgot about you, the president, came out here and made everything better because he didn't forget.
These are thousands of war-weary sailors who have been on board the USS Abraham Lincoln. They're packing up their gear. They've been preparing to once again touched some dry land, as the president just did minutes ago, after more than 9 months at sea. A very, very long time. I mean, there are roughly 2,500 sailors on board the Abraham Lincoln, and they were all gathered on the flight deck of the aircraft carrier. They were cheering wildly this man, the President of the United States, as he told them they were homeward bound. This was certainly one of the longest carrier deployments in recent U.S. military history.
And they have a lot of family and friends waiting for them today. And our Trace Gallagher is amongst them. Trace, are you still with us?
I'm still with you, Jen. Yeah, there's a lot of family here gathered around. If you can imagine how excited the sailors on board that ship are, the families here just as excited. 9 months apart. It is a long, long time. We were here last week when the USS Shiloh came in. There were only 400 sailors on that ship. We're expecting 2,000 to get off this morning, so you can imagine how many family members are here. We do, by the way, have a bird's eye look at this. If we can go to REM 4. And take a look. This crowd started gathering at 4:30 this morning. We are being told, by the way, the USS Abraham Lincoln should arrive here now around 8:30, which is about 35 minutes from now, moving the timeline up by between a half hour and an hour. As it will come in, you will see the families scream, the bands play, the banners wave, the balloons flying, and the first state of business will be to get the new fathers off the ship. There are 150 fathers on board the USS Abraham Lincoln who have never seen their newborn children. They will be, as military custom allows, the first people off the ship, and their families will be allowed kind of some private time before the rest of the sailors are let off and the officers, etc. We don't know exactly how many of the 150 fathers are actually getting off here in San Diego. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Trace, they were probably interrupting.
As the president gets on, you can see that.
Control room, right. We just want to let everybody know, but they probably know. That is the president boarding Air Force One on his way to Silicon Valley. Go ahead, Trace.
Yeah, we were just saying that the new fathers will get off first, and then the officers will follow them, and then the rest of the sailors will follow them. This, of course, a huge homecoming here. In fact, if we can, we just want to bring in real quick Mary Grayson. Mary is waiting for her son, Nick. Mary, this has got to be thrilling for you.
It's extremely thrilling, extremely. I can't wait to see him.
You've been emailing him. What has he said in his emails the last week or so?
I love you and I miss you.
Now, he's been on for 9 months. Are you from San Diego?
No, we're not. We're from San Antonio, Angleton.
And what are you going to, I'm sorry, what are you going to say to Nick when he gets off?
I'm just going to say glad to see you and just give him a big old hug and a kiss and be glad he's home.
All right, Mary, thanks very much. We should note, by the way, the Red Cross sends messages out to these fathers. The Red Cross also sends emergency messages out to the new fathers when their children are born. And the thing is that some of these fathers, their children were in intensive care. It's got to be very disconcerting to be in the middle of a war knowing that your child was born and that they're in intensive care. So the Red Cross does everything they can to make sure these fathers are kept in the loop as to what's going on with their families. That is imperative for these men to be able to do their jobs adequately, is that they know that their families are being taken care of at home. Again, the ship comes in around 8:30 local time. It was supposed to come in around 9:30 or 10 o'clock. They have moved it up to 8:30. It will make its way through the San Diego harbor. And as we drove down here, and as you will see from some of the aerial pictures, as the Abraham Lincoln starts coming in, there will be people lined along the shores of San Diego. You have to remember, this is a very big military town. It is the base of Camp Pendleton for the Marines, also North Island here for the Navy, and there is an Army base also in San Diego. A lot of defense contractors, very strong supporters of the military here in San Diego, and these families are ecstatic that finally their loved ones are coming home. And I'll tell you, when this thing happens, you are going to hear it from miles away. Jane and Greg, go back to you.
Hey, Trace, how long will most of these sailors be able to remain at home? I assume they give them a fair amount of time off, and then they are required to deploy again?
Well, most of them will probably get 30 days. That's what we were talking to the people of the Shiloh last week. They will likely get 30 days. Some of the junior grade sailors will actually stay on the ship for No, I take that back because it goes to Bremerton, Washington as of tomorrow morning, and it should arrive there on Tuesday. But most of those who will arrive here in San Diego will get 30 days off, and then they'll come back to duty. But they probably won't go back on cruise for between a year and 18 months. So they will get some time on land. Some of the junior grade people, when it finally arrives in Everett, Washington on Tuesday, will actually stay on board the ship because, quite frankly, they have no place to live. Now, some of these people, of course, are based in San Diego and based around the country. They have wives and families and homes, but a lot of these younger sailors, when they got on the ship, they didn't have any housing. That was their housing. So when they land in Everett, Washington, they'll get off for a few hours, and then they'll come back at night, and they will sleep on the aircraft carrier. You can imagine being at sea for 10 months and then having to come back your first night in port and sleep on the ship again. So the rule of thumb is 30 days of shore leave is what most of these sailors will get. Jane.
All right, Trace, we want to remind our viewers what they're looking at. On your left-hand part of your screen, you are seeing the group that Trace is with there, the friends and family waiting for the arrival of the USS Abraham Lincoln. Thousands of sailors will be getting off there. A couple thousand more will be going on to Everett, Washington, which is the home base for that carrier. They'll arrive there in the next couple of days. And on the right-hand side of your screen, as you can read on our Fox News alert, President Bush is on board Air Force One. As you can see, it is just beginning to taxi on that runway there. He is at the Naval Air Station in San Diego. He's on his way to Santa Clara, California, to the Silicon Valley. What he's going to be doing today, just a short time from now, he should arrive in about 20 to 40 minutes or so, it looks like on the schedule. He will arrive there and take a tour of a place called United Defense Industries, which is a defense contractor known for making Bradley fighting vehicles amongst other military hardware, etc. Those, of course, very successful in our conflict with Iraq. And the president will take a tour there. He will also address the employees there. He's going to talk, we're told, although we don't have specifics about his speech, we are told that he is going to speak about the war in Iraq, about the war on terror in general, also talk about the economy. Because as we have talked about this morning, also we were speaking about last night, in light of his speech, he has decided to turn a little bit of a corner and needs to, probably in terms of his campaign, he needs to start talking about domestic issues as well, focusing on the economy, though he made it very clear in that speech, if you watched it last night, that Baghdad and Iraq was just one battle in this war on terror, which does continue. So again, Air Force One, they're taxiing at Moffett Airfield there in San Diego, Naval Air Station San Diego. He is on his way to Silicon Valley. John Scott is still with us. He is still probably below deck on board the USS Abraham Lincoln. John, you have been there all week. You probably don't even want to get off, do you? Well, we just lost John Scott. John has boarded in Hawaii, actually. Did not have the dramatic arrival that the president did yesterday, but he has been sleeping in the bunks just like the rest of the sailors, men and women aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, some 5,000 of them. Trace Gallagher, I believe, though, is still with us. He is with the friends and family who are waiting for the Lincoln to arrive. Trace, how much longer until the Lincoln
We think about
arrives?
a half hour, Jane, as we watch, about a half hour, we think, as we watch the president take off. You will see the ship from the distance in probably 15 or 20 minutes. We are, by the way, going to move here in about 10 minutes and go out and watch the reunions, the first reunions. As we talked about earlier, the new fathers will come off of this ship first. There are 150 on board. We're not exactly sure how many, as you can hear the cheers and the screams behind me. We're not exactly sure how many new fathers are getting off here in San Diego, but on board 150 men who have never seen their newborn children. They'll get to meet them, many of them, today. You know, we should note this is a very happy homecoming for more than just the fact that the ship is coming in. You have to keep in mind, over the course of this 10-month deployment, they flew 16,500 sorties. They did not lose one single airplane, and they did not lose any crewmen. So that is a big, big boost for the people who are on this dock right now. In fact, in the 10 months that this ship was at sea, there was not one major injury on board the Abraham Lincoln, which is, of course, a testament to the naval technology and the training that these men and women have. We're expecting in about 20 minutes to be able to see, or 15 minutes to be able to see the tip of the Abraham Lincoln crowning the corner. It is a very picturesque scene as it comes into San Diego Bay because it is a wonderful city, a backdrop. It is surrounded by water. The Coronado Bridge will lead the way, and the ship will come through and dock here. It will take about 15 or 20 minutes for them to actually dock this thing. I mean, it's 1,100 feet long, so you can imagine the task of putting this thing next to the dock, and then, only then, they'll drop the plank, the gangplank, and the new fathers will go off as we watch the president taxiing and getting ready to take off, Jane.
And Trace, we've heard so much from John Scott about the thrill that it really has been for the sailors on board to have the president on board and spending the night with them. I can imagine, though, that the families, too, are pretty proud that the president was there and that their family members were able to take part of this part of history.
Boy, and Jane, not only proud of the fact that the president was on board, they're proud of the fact that what a job these men did. As John was telling us earlier, they were supposed to come home in January. They were in Australia. They were on shore leave for a week, and when they got back on board, they were actually still heading home, and the Pentagon called and told them that they had to turn around and go back to the Arabian Gulf to participate in Operation Enduring Freedom, which of course became Operation Iraqi Freedom. They were gone for an additional 4 months, and we talked to the captain of the USS Shiloh last week, and he told us, look, it is very, very hard to tell people that they've got to be away from home for 4 more months, but they knew the task at hand was key. They went in and they did their job with the battle group of the Lincoln. They fired some 116 Tomahawk missiles. This battle group did. I mentioned earlier 16,500 sorties. That is 24 hours a day, these planes taking off and landing, and did not lose one single airplane. So yeah, you mentioned about they're proud the president was on board, but they are proud of what their husbands and wives and sons and daughters have accomplished in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And just me talking about this, you get a resounding support from the people around me. They're listening to our live shot, and they are nodding their heads and they're yelling, saying, that's absolutely right. We can't wait to have them home because we're proud of them. Not only the families, but America is proud of them. Everybody proud of the job these people have done. And that's why when people come down here, they will line the docks. This is only for families here on North Island, but along the docks in San Diego, you will see dozens of people waving banners and welcoming them home, because this is a tribute to a job very well executed. Jane?
And certainly a great military town San Diego is, and it looks like just a perfectly glorious day. Thanks, Trace. Again, on the right-hand side of your screen, you see Air Force One there on the ground at the North Island Naval Air Station in San Diego, ready to take off, headed a bit north up to Silicon Valley. And now we're going to go live to our Molly Henneberg, who is in D.C. She has more on what the president has planned for the rest of the day. Good morning, Molly.
Good morning, Jane. Yes, when he gets to Santa Clara, California today, we're going to hear him speak about really 2 topics, about the economy and about national security. And that's kind of how the White House wants the people of America to see that the president can be focused on, domestic issues and then the whole broader issue of national security and the war on terror. Heard a lot about the economy from the president recently. He was really pushing Congress to pass his tax plan with at least $550 billion worth of tax cuts. There you see Air Force One taking off now, going from San Diego up to Santa Clara in Silicon Valley. And he also wants, as I was saying, he wants Congress to pass his tax plan, $550 billion worth of tax cuts, and stop the, as the White House calls it, the double taxation of dividends on stocks. And then we'll also hear him talk about national security. And we heard a little bit about that last night, that this battle of Iraq, as he called it, may be over. The battle of Afghanistan, as far as major combat operations, may be over. But we're still part of a war on terror that is still going on. And he was saying last night that al-Qaeda might be wounded, but it's not destroyed, and that our enemies still are going to try to attack us. But as far as the president will say that the U.S. will not stop anything that it's doing right now to prevent our enemies from attacking us. So that's sort of the two-pronged attack or two-pronged speech, I guess you should say, that we'll hear today from the president on the economy, on national security. And one more point, Joan, just about this weekend. Jane, he's going to go to his Crawford, Texas ranch where he will meet with Australian Prime Minister John Howard. Jane? All right, Molly Henneberg at the White House for us. We will check back with you very soon. And now we want to try to establish our link, or reestablish our link, with John Scott, who, as you may know by now, is aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. John, can you hear us now?
I think we got you this time, Jane. Yeah, thanks very much. For an aviation buff like myself, the chance to spend a week on board an aircraft carrier has been absolute heaven. I guess these sailors who've been on board for 10 months wouldn't necessarily see it that way. The president, of course, left here about half an hour ago. He came aboard. To obviously thank these troops for a job well done and then make that address to the nation. You can see the video as the Marine One lifted off the deck here just about 35 minutes ago. The president spent some time this morning with the executive officer of the ship, just talking about family life, talking about baseball, talking about the war, and talking about this ship. As you have noted, Jane, about 2,000 sailors are going to get off here in San Diego. That's the ship's air wing. They're the people who take care of the aircraft, which are, after all, the reason for the existence of this giant vessel. So it takes a lot of people to maintain them. 2,000 people going to be getting off. They might get back on this ship, probably not. This ship's going into dry dock soon. They will probably be reassigned to another aircraft carrier after they leave this one. The ship's company, on the other hand, the 3,000 people who care for and maintain this ship, they're going to be going all the way to its home port in Everett, Washington. Now back inside the hangar deck here, kind of a strange scene going on. Boxes and boxes of roses magically got delivered to the ship. Ryan Ely is holding a bunch of them. Ryan, what's this all about?
Something for my girlfriend.
I hope she's not watching TV right now, because a surprise is always better. How does the Navy work this program out?
Well, I guess they pretty much flew some roses on us, or on for us, so we could give them to our loved ones, let them know we're thinking about them.
And you had to order these in advance, right?
No, just walked right up a couple minutes ago and picked some out.
Oh, well, it's my understanding they've got something like 12 gigantic shipping boxes. Turn to the side here, Sailor Steiner. That's one way to carry your roses. Who are those for?
They're for my wife, Rena.
Well, Rena, look what's coming home. That'll ease some of the sting of a 10-month deployment, huh?
Well, 10 months has been a long time, and it's good to be back. It's real good to be back in the States.
I'll bet it is. Now take a look over here. This is kind of interesting. I was just asking what all these sailors are picking up in these boxes in bubble wrap. Well, guess what? It's alcohol. They are allowed in overseas ports like Australia, which they've visited, to buy some of that good Australian wine. The problem is they're not allowed to take it back to their berthings. Private alcohol, a big no-no on board a ship. So they give it to the Navy. The Navy crates it up, puts it in these boxes, tucks it away in some safe storage somewhere on board. And then today, on the day that they're all going to walk away, they can get their alcohol back. So looks like Richard Herring is getting a couple of cases there of something good. We hope he and his family enjoy that. What do you got there? What are you going to be drinking?
I have 9 bottles of wine. I have some Sandalford Shiraz, and I also have some Cabernet Sauvignon Blanc.
Well, you're going to be toasting your big deployment here. Good luck to you. Before they're actually going to be allowed to set foot on dry land and fall into the arms of the people they love. That's the situation here inside the hangar. But interesting, Jane, as we're pulling into port here, we see the aircraft carrier Stennis. It's number 74 in the fleet. The Abraham Lincoln is number 72, so the Stennis is a little bit newer ship. That is likely to be the next home of the air wing that I'm with here. I've told you a couple of times now this morning, the air wing is not permanently assigned to any one aircraft carrier. They go to whatever carrier is available. So the aircraft pilots and the people who service those planes, they just go where they're needed, and the Abraham Lincoln is about to go into dry dock for an extended period of refurbishment. I think it takes about 9 months. The Stennis is likely to be the carrier where these sailors will go next. So as of right now, 1/6 of America's aircraft carrier fleet is right here in San Diego Harbor. Jane?
And John, I also wanted to ask you, Trace was talking about how the new fathers will get off first, but how does it go? Does it go by rank?
Why? I'm sorry that, Jane, I'm sorry I missed your question, but because I'm here with the sailor who I'm told gets the first kiss when you get off the boat. Is that so? How did you win that honor?
I have no idea.
You have no idea.
I guess they pulled my name out of a hat.
They walk up to you and say, you get to be, what, the first one off?
Yep. Be one of the first people. There's 2 of us, I think.
Okay, tell me your name.
My name is AM3 Eaton.
And who's going to be planting that first kiss on you?
My wife, Crystal Eaton.
Where are you from? You live in San Diego or somewhere nearby?
I'm stationed in Lemoore. I'm from Bakersfield, California, though.
So you're with the Hornet pilots, the Hornet Squadron out of Lemoore?
VFA 115.
All right, so your wife came down from Lemoore. And does she know yet that you get to be the first one off?
She knew before I did.
Okay. Well, that's got to be a pretty good feeling after 10 months at sea.
Oh yeah.
Well, congratulations to you and congratulations to her. You know, I gotta say, you must be a pretty low-key guy because you don't seem that excited.
I am.
All right, Jane, trust me, he's excited. All right?
Maybe he's nervous about getting that first kiss. I don't know. John, that actually was my question. Was my question about how it goes, who gets off first. Trace had said that the men who have the newborns do, but does it go by rank after that?
Let me ask our contact. Is it rank that determines how? This is a guy. We got to get this guy on TV. This is Taylor Clark. He's been sort of our helper, our Navy source of information all week long. Done a great job. He's a credit to the Navy. Who gets to be the first off? Does it go by rank?
No, usually they just have like a raffle. They don't have to put any money into it, and they'll just pull a name out of the hat, and then the lucky guy, is the first one off and get whether it's his wife or a girlfriend or what have you. So.
But will the enlisted sailors be going off mostly before the ship's crew? I guess before the ship's officers.
Well, luckily for a ship this size, you can have a couple of brows going across. So there'll be one for the officers to go and the enlisted. So they'll be just piling off.
And when do you get off, Taylor?
I get off when you guys get off.
Well, Jane, I think we'll be here for a couple of days now. We're looking forward to another cruise on board the Abraham Lincoln. Just kidding. We're getting off in San Diego. Jane?
Okay, John Scott, thanks very much. And we're joined now by Rick Fulbaum in the studio as well.
Nice to see you. I love looking at these pictures. First of all, I love looking at that ship. My God, take a look at it. But seeing the reunions and seeing the excitement on the faces of these sailors, even though I think he was a little nervous to be on television.
I think we should point out it wasn't his first kiss. It was just the first kiss getting
exactly.
off. He's not that nervous.
Trace Gallagher is on dry land, and he's there with some family members. And I believe, Trace, you're there with a mom and a brand new baby. Is that right?
We are indeed, Rick. We are here with Jennifer Brown and her baby, 3-week-old Caleb. They are waiting for Jeffrey to come in. Jennifer, you've got to be ecstatic.
I am very ecstatic. I am speechless. I don't even know how to explain how I feel right now.
Your husband missed this birth by 3 weeks. He was supposed to be home in January. What was it like going this alone?
I wouldn't have made it if I wouldn't have had my family and God and Jeff. He's a big help, and it was really hard, but we did it, and we're here, and we're gonna see him finally.
It had to be tough on him, Jennifer.
Yeah, it was very tough on him. I know he cried when he called me in the hospital when he was born, but it's all right. He's only 3 weeks old. He didn't miss too much. So.
Is Caleb your first?
Yes, Caleb's our first baby.
What were Jeffrey's emails like? What was he talking about?
Oh, he would go on and on and on. His emails were like so long, and just about how much he couldn't wait to get home and how much he loved his son, and he hasn't even seen him yet.
Now the new fathers are the first off the ship. You're going to get a chance to spend a little bit of quiet time. What are you going to say if we might eavesdrop? What are you going to say to Jeffrey when he finally sees his new son?
I don't know. I'm just going to tell him how much I love him and how glad that he's coming home, or that he is home.
A little bit emotionally overwhelming for you?
Yeah, it's very overwhelming.
Where are you from, Jennifer?
From Everett, Washington. We're stationed up there. But I couldn't wait to see him, so I had to come down here.
So he's actually going to get off, and he's going to see you here, and then he's going to get back on the ship, and you'll see him in Everett?
No, he got 25 days leave upon arrival, so we're going to get 25 days before he has to go back to Everett.
What's the plan when you first get home?
Just to spend as much time with each other and the baby, and just to enjoy him being home.
Jennifer, congratulations. Good luck to you. So one story out of 150, there are 150 new dads on this ship who have not seen their newborn children. They, again, well, after the guy who gets off for the first kiss, they'll be the ones who get off first and get a chance to meet their new children and see their wives. As the ship starts inching toward the dock, and as John Scott was saying, it could take a while before they actually start letting these people off, because there are a lot of tasks to accomplish before they can lower the gangplank and let them walk off. Rick?
Trace, thanks so much. We'll be checking back with Trace and John Scott, and we'll keep our eye on these pictures throughout the morning here on Fox News Channel. We do want to break away for just a moment before we return back to San Diego to travel up north to the town of Modesto, California. There is an important hearing that's taking place today outside of the courthouse. It involves Scott Peterson and his request to take on a new defense attorney. That hearing is about to get underway, and Dan Springer is monitoring it for us, and he joins us now with a quick update. Dan.
After his speech here in Northern California, the president will meet with Australian Prime Minister John Howard, and then the two will fly to the Bush Ranch in Crawford, Texas, where they'll spend tonight and tomorrow. They will give a news conference tomorrow, and even though questions will be limited, Mr. Bush is likely, or it is possible, he will be asked about the nation's economy and when Americans can expect it to improve. His press secretary, Ari Fleischer, kind of brushed aside the rise in the unemployment rate today, up to 6%. Fleischer says it's a lagging indicator and doesn't really reflect the strength of the nation's economy. Rick?
Wendell Goler in Santa Clara. We'll be checking back with you, Wendell, as we get closer to the president's speech, which is slated to begin in just about 8 minutes or so from now. Of course, we will carry the president's speech at United Defense Industries live right here on Fox News Channel as we continue to take a look at sailors who are making their way off of the USS Abraham Lincoln and into the arms of their loved ones. A very happy reunion for hundreds and hundreds of sailors after 9+ long months at sea, helping out with the war on terror and most recently with Operation Iraqi Freedom. California Congressman Duncan Hunter continues to be with us. As we take a look at these shots, Congressman, we talk a little bit about the president as we wait for his speech, which is just a couple of minutes away. It was clear that the president was in his element last night on board the USS Abraham Lincoln. Now that he's about to shift his focus from the war to domestic issues and to the economy, do you think that he will be as comfortable in that role?
You know, I think he will. I think just as we have, we've built in this new flexibility and agility in our military systems that we saw in Iraq, I think the president understands he has to be agile in this next 15 months or so, and that is and I think he kind of wanted to bring this, not only thank the troops and uplift them and elevate them, but bring the war to a closure, because I think he will shift, pivot, and really start working now on these economic economic issues, because he understands that that's that very important piece. And of course, he can harken back to the early 1990s when President Bush listened perhaps a little too long to the accolades for Gulf War I. And didn't, at least it didn't appear to the nation to be working as hard as they thought he should be working on economic issues. So I think that I think this president will work very, very focused, in a very focused way over the next 15 months on the economy. That starts, I think, today.
Everybody wants to know about the tax cut plan and how much of it we're going to get. There is some haggling, some negotiating that's going on right now in the building where you are. How is all that going to play out?
Well, of course, tax cuts are like just as any economic program is a loaf of bread with lots of players who take a position, and ultimately you end up somewhere in the center. I think the president's not getting as much as we'd like to see him get, but he's going to get at least half a loaf, and what he wants to do is get enough of an economic impetus in place to produce those additional jobs, to tool up the American economy, to expand those operations. Because we've got all these great folks coming back who have preserved our freedom. Blue-collar workers can't hire each other, and returning service personnel can't hire each other. You need to energize the people who make the payrolls, and that is the companies that make the payrolls, the small businesses. That's what the president's focused on. He wants to have payrolls being made in the next 18 months. He wants to have new people coming on and getting jobs, and having those people feeling that they've got a piece of the American dream. That's their success, and with it is his success.
Once again, Congressman, we're taking a look at some live pictures of sailors who are now making their way to reunions with their loved ones after departing the USS Abraham Lincoln. Trace Gallagher has been spending some time with some of those very happy family members, and he joins us once again. Trace.
One more extremely happy family member here, Rick. This woman's husband is about to come down off the stairs. What is your name, ma'am?
Jennifer Brown.
Oh, Jennifer, that's right. Her husband's Jeffrey. We talked to you earlier. So where is he?
I don't know.
Oh, you can't see him yet. She's still waiting for him. She had looked up and said she saw him. Here we go. Here he is. Look at this.
There he is. Oh, he's right here.
9 months gone. You can imagine the reunion here. We talked to Jennifer earlier. The baby is 3 weeks old. Jeffrey, how sweet is this?
Very sweet. Very sweet. I can't even speak right now.
Beautiful baby.
Thank you very much.
What do you think, Jennifer?
I don't know what to think. I just want to see him.
I know you need.
Was it worth the wait?
Jeffrey, we've been talking to your wife all morning. What did you think when you saw Caleb?
Beautiful baby. I'm in the last for words right now. I'm so happy right now.
As I would be. Another reunion. They still keep coming off. When you heard about it on the ship, what went through your mind?
I was like, okay, first of all, I was doing happy hour, right? It's the hour we do cleaning. I didn't even expect her to be on TV or anything like that. I was scrubbing a ladder, and all of a sudden I turned around, and she's on TV. I was like, wait a minute, that's me, right? And I was like, okay. I couldn't get off with the new father, so I tried to get off as soon as I could, you know. So I'm really happy that I got off to see her.
When you were on the ship and you found out that the baby was born, what was the discourse?
Okay. When I first found out, I think I went forward and aft through the whole ship about 1 million times, going crazy, trying to find out exactly as much as I could. I was running back and forth, pushing people over if I could, if they were in my way. I was ecstatic.
And when you found out?
Yes. I wanted to be there so bad. If we didn't extend, I would have been there to be, you know, there for the child. But
how difficult is it being on a ship when you know your child and your wife are at home and you've got a job to do?
Luckily, I was off, but I'd say I just had to hold myself. You know, got to remember what I'm doing this for. You know, remember it's not only me out here. You know, I'm freeing a different country. You know, I'm helping other people out. I can't always think about myself. You know, sometimes, even though I really miss her and everything.
Jeffrey, well said. Enjoy some time with your family. Guys, let's go back to you.
Hey, Trace, real quickly, how much time does he have with his family? How much leave time are these men and women going to have?
I think as a rule they get 30 days, Rick, and then they have to go back to work. But the good news is that most of them don't have to go back on cruise for at least a year, maybe 18 months. So that's the good news. They're going to be on land for the better part of a year or a year and a half. And some of them have told me that they'll be on land permanently because they have done their cruise and they have done their at-sea duty, and now they'll be on land for the remainder of their military careers, which for them, I'm sure, is a relief, having done their work, having done it well, and then to be able to come back home and spend some quality time with your family and start your life together in one place.
Trace Gallagher, great job as always, Trace. And again, we're waiting for President Bush, who is slated to speak in just a couple of minutes, and we'll take you there live. This is Santa Clara, California, and this is United Defense Industries. And I hear some music. Is that Hail to the Chief? No, it's not. But we will go back there as soon as the president begins his remarks. In the meantime, let's check back in with California Congressman Duncan Hunter, chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. Chairman Hunter, as we take a look at these pictures, I know that people around the country and around the world are trying to come up with some way to give their thanks to these men and women who have returned home after such a great job. What would you tell people they can do? How can they reach out to these military men and women and say thank you?
Well, you know, this is the wonder of America that we're seeing, and we're seeing that with all the technology, with all the complexity in our society, the most wondrous part of it in this country and the center of it is a family with a man and a wife, and in this case, lots of new babies. And what we can do if throughout the country in the community, we can open up our stores. We can give discounts to military people. We can continue to do things like we did in Operation Homefront in San Diego, which is just provide lots of services to the military families. And of course, what we can do on the Armed Services Committee and in Congress and in the White House this year is make sure we provide quality of life for these folks. And that means some new military housing for our families, so they've got good single-family housing with quality, with security, and also a good, a well-deserved pay boost for these military families. But I think just communities reaching out, saying thank you. And in fact, I think it'd be great if our soldiers and sailors, airmen and Marines kept their uniforms on as they come home. And I'm going to recommend this to the Joint Chiefs for at least a week or so that when they go down to the local hardware store or the local barber shop or the grocery store, people can say, thank you, neighbor, for keeping me free.
I think that's a message that people all around the country would love to be able to deliver firsthand. As we take a look once again at these pictures, there are flowers, there are rucksacks and duffel bags, and there are happy reunions taking place at the bottom of those stairs. What's it like, Congressman, coming back from a tour of duty? You've been away for so long. You've been involved in some pretty harrowing events. Now you're back home and you're with your family. I imagine, and you can speak to this from your own personal experience, I imagine there is a transition that takes place, an adjustment period.
Well, certainly, and of course, you know, I came back during Vietnam. I came back as a single guy, and I didn't have that. I didn't have that family, and I always kind of wondered when you would see your colleagues who had families, who had wives and children. And there was a great deal of worry because you always worry about your family, and the single guys didn't worry about that because they didn't have that attachment and those other people that they had to worry about back home. But certainly when you come back and be with your family again after being separated for many months is I think it's just an exercise in how wondrous this country is and the communities that we live in, and the freedom that we have to go or come, to buy or sell, to go to the religious institutions that we want to go to just enjoy the basic freedom of America, and just maybe walk down the street with your wife and your children, be able to go to a movie, go to a mall. Just living life as a free person in the United States, especially after you've been elsewhere and you've seen all the troubles of the world, to come home to this great haven that we call the United States of America and just enjoy basic freedoms, I think is something that reminds us. I think that people that are here who don't wear the uniform, never wear the uniform, are a little bit like those folks described in a saying over a bunker in Vietnam, and that is that for those folks who defend the country, freedom has a taste that the protected will never know. And I think going abroad and serving in uniform gives you a renewed appreciation for what we have here in this country called the United States of America.
Well said, Congressman Hunter. Let's go back now to Trace Gallagher, who's watching a lot of these reunions take place firsthand. Trace.
And as they make their way down the stairs, Rick, it's always amazed me that some of these sailors can pack 9 months of their life into one sea bag and haul it off. But you have to keep in mind, there are some 5,500 sailors on this ship, and they don't have much space. I mean, they get very little space to put their belongings. They also were in shore in Hawaii as well as in Australia, and so they gathered some belongings there. And the night before they disembark, they always have to try and cram all their belongings in their sea bag to get it off. And some have bought roses for their wives and different things and knickknacks for their families. And the funny thing is watching them try and pack these things full to haul them off. You look up now, there are still many, many sailors on board that ship. They're coming off in waves, if you pardon the term. And they, of course, if we pan down here, we talked to Amber earlier. Amber's still waiting for her husband to come off. They're now kind of, in fact, the military just now went up to get him. They're thinking, wait a minute, you're the last mom here with no husband. So the military came by and said, okay, what's his name? They're going to go up, they're going to find him and bring him back down to her. She will have a reunion in the next 5 or 6 minutes. We're sticking with you, Amber, believe me. It's going to be great. In the meantime, there are still, if you look over here, Rick, still thousands of people waiting for their loved ones also to come off the ship. And once that happens, we will make our way across that around that gate and talk to some of those people. They too waiting for their loved ones. 9 months, no less important is their reunion than the ones that were happening just a few short moments ago. We look up and we see nothing right now. They're waiting, and then they'll let the next wave off. And they might be waiting so they can let Amber's husband come off, because he might be the last dad on the boat. They're from Everett, Washington, by the way. So that's one of the reasons that it was delayed. If he was based or was supposed to get off here in San Diego, we assume he would have been among the first off the ship. But the wait, if you waited 9 months, 1 week, and 1 day, I'm sure 5 more minutes, painful as it may be, she could probably handle it. Rick?
I'm sure she can handle it. Hey, Trace, I know that the military is very good at organizational skills, and so when we see the men and women coming off of the ship, we know that that's been carefully orchestrated. What about for those family members, though, who are behind those bars and waiting? Do we know if there's been some kind of a coordination so that the family members who are waiting will be able to hook up with their loved ones at the same time that they come off the ship?
I think, Rick, it's pretty much a free-for-all once those gates open. Once they start letting the rest of the sailors off this ship, they coordinate the first kiss. Here comes more off the ship. They coordinate the first kiss pretty well. They do the dads pretty well. The officers then come off. But once you get to the general families, I mean, these people have waited so long and are so excited. There's not a lot they could do if it really was coordinated, because once they open the gates and they see their loved ones come off, you will see a mad rush, a lot of tears, a lot of flowers, some teddy bears, and a great many hugs for these people. And so, no, there is very little orchestration once you get past the first acts of diplomacy. The dads, by the way, is a military tradition. They live by tradition, and they will make sure those are well orchestrated. As for the rest, our understanding is, if last week is any indication, it is willy-nilly and go get them.
Hey, Trace, where did all these roses come from? Is there a florist on board the USS Abraham Lincoln?
There's a ship on board, Rick, as a matter of fact, and one of the numbers we had is this ship in the 9 months, you talk about a good retail business, did $4,400,000 and some odd dollars in sales. That's Cokes, hats, clothing, shaving kits, all that stuff. That's how much they sell. This is, for all intents and purposes, a city. 5,500 people on this ship. The store has to carry a great many items, and every time they go in port, store goes in, they restock, and they sell a lot of the stuff. By the way, very reasonable prices, too. So when you're talking about $4 million in sales, that's a pretty healthy business for a retail store. That's where we understand they get the flowers. There are also some kiosk is probably not the right word, but there are some kiosks on board the night before you come in where some of the new dads and some of the husbands and even the wives can buy flowers for their loved ones. Rick?
Trace, as we continue to take a look at these pictures, and you've been talking to some of these family members, do you know of any special celebrations that are planned at some of the homes where a lot of these men and women are going to be returning to after a long time away?
Well, you know, what's happening is that you talk to some of these families, and the first thing they want to do is they're going to spend a day or two here in San Diego. Then they want to get on planes or on cars and get back to their respective homes. They're from scattered around the country. We talked to Michelle earlier, who met her husband. She was from Texas. And then, of course, Amber's from Everett, Washington. Her husband is not going to get back on the boat and go to Everett. In fact, he'll have 25 days of shore leave here. We're not sure if they're going to spend it here in San Diego. But as far as party mode, you see restaurants flying banners in some of the banner planes as the ship was coming in, because this is going to be a very good business day for San Diego. A lot of these families will head directly to local restaurants. They will have some celebrations start there, and then the neighborhoods scattered around San Diego will be flush with banners and flowers and balloons, because there will be homecoming celebration after homecoming celebration. Rick?
Well, if you want to go out to dinner tonight in San Diego, California, you better have a reservation. It is now 1 o'clock on the East Coast. It's 10 a.m. out west, where the happy reunions are taking place in San Diego, California. You're taking a look at live pictures of sailors getting off of their ship, the USS Abraham Lincoln. They have been at sea for an awfully long time, more than 9 months, and they are now in the process of stepping off board the ship and greeting their loved ones down. And we've been watching some of these happy reunions taking place. Trace Gallagher is on the ground for us. We're also talking with California Congressman Duncan Hunter, and Patty Ann Brown is joining us now in our studio. And Patty Ann, as we watch these great pictures and these reunions, we're also waiting for an important speech from President Bush that's supposed to start any minute.
That's right. President Bush, fresh off of his speech last night from the decks of this very aircraft carrier, was taken back to shore by helicopter this morning after spending the night in those close quarters on board. And now he's in Silicon Valley, and he will be delivering that speech. And of course, we will have that as soon as it starts.
Let's go back to Trace Gallagher, who's there on the ground at the dock. What have you got, Trace?
Well, I can tell you, Rick, that that one of the producers just whispered in my ear some vital information. You asked earlier about the flowers. Well,
yes.
The flowers apparently were cotted on board yesterday. A plane brought them on, and they were labeled California Fresh Flowers. And that is the tale behind many of the roses you see. And as you see them right now coming off with flowers and balloons, and Amber standing in front of me still waiting for her husband. If you missed it, she is from Everett, Washington. Her husband would be the last new father off the ship. They are now on there looking for him to bring him directly to his wife. They are getting off now. These are, by the way, the general enlisted, Rick, and they, of course, will go to their loved ones behind the gate. If we can pan over here, Scotty, you can see right now, over by the gate here, they're starting to find their way through here, and there are many homecoming celebrations going on the west side of that gate that we can't see right now, but we do have on REM 44, if you guys can take that. You can look down and see some of those celebrations that we're referring to. Those will continue here for the next hour or 2 hours, and then nothing more than these people want to do is to go and get some private time and spend some time alone with their families and their respective places as the cheers go up each time they see one of their loved ones come down the stairs. This thing will go on for another hour, hour and a half or so. Then this dock will be pretty much empty. They'll pack this thing up again tomorrow morning, and they will head up to Everett, Washington. They are scheduled to arrive there for a third homecoming. Remember, one was in Honolulu. Here in San Diego, the third and final homecoming will be in Everett, Washington on Tuesday morning. And of course, we'll bring that to you as well. Rick and Patty Ann.
Trace, keep those stories coming. We'll check back with you in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Well, meanwhile, we have word just in that the DNA tests are in now in the case of that missing boy, and it is not Tristan Myers. Just to recap for you, Tristan Myers, also known as Buddy, disappeared from his home in North Carolina about 2.5 years ago and had not been seen since. And a couple of months ago, a boy that resembled him, who was 2.5 years older, showed up, was dropped off at a hospital near Chicago, and after several months of questioning the boy and the Centers for Missing and Exploited Children becoming involved, they determined that there was a possibility that this boy, who was being known as Eli Quick at the time, might actually be Tristan Myers. But now, again, DNA tests confirming, according to the Associated Press, which spoke with Tristan's mother, that she has now been told that those DNA tests confirm that the boy, Eli Quick, is not Tristan Myers.
Well, so it's sad, and that search for that young missing boy will continue as we continue to look at some live pictures from San Diego, California, and the happy reunions that are taking place there. We've been lucky to be joined for the last hour or so by California Congressman Duncan Hunter, who is the chairman of the Armed Service Committee and who's been watching these events unfold with us. The congressman is also a Vietnam veteran, and I'm just wondering if you can give us a sense, Congressman, of these happy reunions as we talk about the future of the military, the future of the armed services. You yourself chair that committee, that important committee in the House of Representatives. We know the Secretary of Defense has been pushing for some major changes. Are we going to see some major changes in our military over the next year or so?
You know, we are going to see some major changes. We're also going to see, I think, some reinforcement of some of the old. I think that the Iraq theater showed us some of the old, some of the new. We saw these new systems where precision-guided munitions, where instead of carpet bombing a bridge to knock the bridge down with hundreds of bombs, you send one precision-guided munition in, it hits one strut on that bridge, it brings the bridge down.